Well, as I think I mentioned, from my role in it was much different. In Bioshock, I didn't really build anything. I was the numbers guy. I would play with spreadsheets all day long and track, how much damage bullets would do and how many hit points monsters would have and how much loot would appear on each level and trying to, tinker and tune the economy and make the difficulty curve what we wanted, that sort of thing. Um, so from my personal point of view, it was hugely different. I mean, also it was just like the scope was so much huger than anything that I'd been a part of before. I mean, the Bioshock team was just massive and very highly specialized all the way around. Um, but it was a very satisfying and rewarding experience, like pretty much every game I've ever worked on was. Um, but no, I'm happy to have had the experience.
Also, if
And
I
enter.
if I I was about to say you worked on a recent, well, relatively recent game with Irrational co-founder Jonathan Che, correct?
Yes, I worked on Card Hunter, which is kind of a fusion of board game and collectible card game and role playing game. It's quite a lot of fun. It's a free to play browser game with what is generally acknowledged as a very generous, uh, you know, payment model where you really don't, you know, you don't need to pay money to have pretty much the full experience.
I still haven't. So
Um,
no, I
so,
think I may
but
have dropped some money just so that Jonathan Che would get it,
well, that was
but
nice of you.
but
Um,
but
yeah, I worked
yeah,
I worked
I
on
agree.
that as a on a part-time basis, maybe 15 to 20 hours a week on average for about 2 or 3 years. And John's a great guy to work with. I'd had experience working with him, but Looking Glass and Irrational. So um, it was all done remotely. The team was spread out over like 3 or 4 different continents. So our conference calls were often at strange times. Um, but I did kind of content creation for that. I worked on the specifics of the cards for the most part, and built a bunch of the game boards. Uh, but yes, that was the last. I mean, unless you count the Choice of the Star Captain, which is a story game hybrid. Uh, Card Hunter was the last game design that I've done.
And what games are you playing and enjoying these days?
Well, like my daughter, I'm playing Hearthstone a lot. I really enjoy that.
Excellent game.
Um, and I'm playing I think it's called Pillars of Eternity. It's the fairly new kind of Baldur's Gate spiritual successor game. Uh, I played something very similar to that before. I think it was called Divinity: Original Sin.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Very similar game.
Yes, nice
Yeah.
crowdsourced games, Kickstarter games.
Yes. Those are fun. And I still play, board games and card games with the kids quite often. Um, I mean, they are, if anything, more game insatiable than I am. Like, I've actually had the experience where I had to say no. I don't want to play a game right now. I'm gamed out for the time being, which certainly was
I
not
didn't
a
know
thing
that
I'd
was even
ever.
possible.
I didn't know it was even possible either. But when your 7-year-old is begging for the third or fourth game in a row, and you have to make dinner instead, sometimes
You just don't
have to
eat.
say
That's
no.
You just don't eat. You continue to play.
Ah, that
Your
causes its own
priorities here, Dory.
problems. I know. Fortunately, my kids as they get older, they're able to play more and more interesting games. I did play a lot of.
Oh, I think we may have lost your audio, Dorian.
I'll try to get Dorian back here. Hold on one second.
We're getting Dorian back. A little technical glitch.
I can
He's back.
sort of hear you.
We can hear you now.
Okay.
The internet.
Yay.
So we left you. You said you were starting to play more complex games with your
Yes. After I've kind of graduated from the purgatory of Candyland and Monopoly Junior and the little kids games. But I'm actually teaching the kids like real, mid-level Euro games. Like Fresco and even things that are ahead of a step above Ticket to Ride. Things a little more advanced strategy. And the kids get them pretty well. Even my younger one, who's only 7, pretty game savvy.
Must be in the DNA.
Certainly, it was by design. I figured when the kids are old enough, there's 4 of us, optimal number of players for most Euro games. It's all the plan is all coming together.
That's right, master plan. Well, I think related to that, when games like Ultima Underworld and Ultima Underworld 2 came out, there were far fewer people who played these kinds of games, and so some of the mechanics that we had were pretty hardcore for a lot of the audience. And today, 2 decades later, I think there's a much broader understanding of gaming. Many more people play games, whether it's board games or computer games or mobile games or whatever. And so a lot of these mechanics don't seem so alien, and which is nice because there's a larger audience out there that I think can appreciate these kinds of games. Yeah. And fantasy's become, I think, much more mainstream. With the Lord of the Rings films, or Game of Thrones and those kinds of properties that have reached beyond the core fantasy audience that was around when we were making these games, because these were these were considered really niche games for gaming geeks.
Yeah. And just UI design has come so far since now. Part of the
wait. You're not saying that Underworld 2 is brilliant, absolutely intuitive.
It was brilliant for its time, certainly, but certain core concepts just didn't exist in the general game design consciousness back then.
Like mouse look.
For instance.
Yeah, but we did have nice silver arrows sitting up on your screen. That's something.
Yeah. It all seemed very cutting edge back then.
Well, it was back then.
1992 or 3.
3 was when we started it, I think. No, maybe it was released in 93.
It was released in 93. The Ultima Underworld 2 was less than a year development. I think it was about 10 months. It was a real rapid fire. Saying from earlier, when we finished the original Ultima Underworld, our publisher Origin Systems wanted us to take all the technology we had built and do a fairly quick sequel to that, which is exactly what we did. In some ways that was good because it kind of forced us to use most of the technology. We made a few tweaks, but the engine was 95% the same engine. And we really tried to innovate on and work with was on the content side to see what we could do, because we certainly had a lot of things that we thought of trying in Ultima Underworld, but just didn't have the time to do and held off on those for the sequel. But it was a very intensive project being done in only about 10 months.
And in some sense, that's an indication of what a healthy project Underworld 1 was in some ways. When you're doing a creative project, the ideal, for me, and these are process ideas that were not really even very well formed, at least in our industry at that time, right? But when you're doing a creative project and really trying to innovate, you really want to have a very agile process, right? You want to have a system that you can be very flexible to take opportunities as they present themselves. And one consequence of that is that you have a sense of direction for the game and what kind of game you're making, but a lot of the specifics about how things are going to be achieved are really perfected in the course of development. And because of that, the best way to approach that is to have an engine that has lots of flexibility and possibility space to it, right? So that you can make those course corrections as you go. And when it came to doing Underworld 2, this meant that we had a lot of possibilities that our engine could afford us that hadn't necessarily been fully explored in the first game.
So, Dorian, I'm going to put you on the spot
Uh-oh.
and ask you, as a game designer, so what do you think we should be doing for Underworld Ascendant?
Free labor.
That's true. I will be happy to tell you that for $65 an hour.
Well, we'll give you 3 minutes. We'll prorate that. So
All right. Okay, that's fair.
that's about $4.20.
We'll take you out for coffee.
Right.
But not at Starbucks, because I don't think you can get.
Right. Well, Tim has already touched on a lot of the things that I would like. The whole physics-based, more simulational aspects of of game design that we were kind of pioneering back with Underworld 2. I mean, certainly, just moving that up, and encasing it in modern technology and modern UI, is still not a thing that's really been, done in a masterful way, I don't think. So I would certainly start by thinking in those terms. I mean, a lot of the stuff that was done, from a pure design point of view in the game we're watching now, was really quite, is still, something to strive for, I think. But so, if you imagine an experience like this where, you had different, you had NPCs who were not just there to be fought, but there to be, talked to and interacted with, and you know, the physical simulation that could be played with in ways that players could kind of engage in self-discovery. Certainly the kind of world where things could happen that were not explicitly expected or designed by the designers. Where you by just throwing things or bouncing things or falling, every sort of interaction you can have, can result in everyone kind of having their own different story to tell about how the game played out. Whereas, the kind of Baldur's Gate games that I've been playing recently, are more, the gameplay is more falling out of numerical simulation, more than physical simulation. So I guess I would start with that in mind, is think about what makes Underworld 2 even today somewhat compelling to play, even with its outdated graphics and UI, and how that can be kind of expanded upon and modernized and made richer by the tools of the modern design age.
So since you've shifted your focus to writing, what are your thoughts in terms of writing and dialogue in a fantasy game today?
I
told you I put you on the spot.
Yeah, I mean, it is sadly as Marc LeBlanc would point out, as he was doing back then, that natural language parsing is still not really possible. I mean, it's kind of the last frontier of things that can be simulated properly.
Well, there's Siri, of course.
Siri is a little, I don't want to say underwhelming, but I'd say unpredictable at times. I mean, but
that's always fun.
I mean, obviously, conversation trees are still being used today.
They are, which is somewhat surprising because it's about a 30-year-old technology.
But
it's hard to point to other
other
These sort of
approaches that
sort
are
of things that